Are you ready to learn what it takes to be a successful attorney? You're listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. I'm sitting down with some of the most successful attorneys so you can learn how they made it to the top of the legal industry. You'll hear their advice for how you can forge your unique path to success. Welcome, Eric Gortner, to Corner Office. I'm so excited to have you. I want to just quickly go through your insanely impressive background so that everyone can hear a little bit about you. So today we have Eric Gortner on the podcast. Eric went to Berkeley for his undergraduate degree. He then got his PhD in psychology from the University of Washington. Then he went to Harvard Law School, graduating in the top 10% of his class. He then joined Kirkland and Ellis as an associate, worked there, then did 2 clerkships, returned to Kirkland, became a partner there, lateraled over to Katten, where he currently is, and eventually became co-chair of the group. Eric, did I miss anything?
No, nice to be here.
Awesome. Okay, great. So you've said that your experience working at Kirkland had a really profound impact on you, both positively and negatively. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. My first job straight out of law school, and to give a little bit of context, because I'd done the PhD and I was thinking of going into an academic career. So I really wasn't thinking about a long-term law firm. What my career ended up being was different than what I envisioned. I thought I might go into either teaching law or being involved in research, or maybe if I was in practice, I might be more in a governmental or an NGO or just something that was a little more academic-y or policy driven. So in all candor, my coming to Kirkland was a little bit of let's pay off law school debt and let's also figure out, have some pragmatic practice. I wanted to be a practicing attorney, but I wasn't entirely sure that my career would be in a law firm environment. But I think coming out of law school, one of the things the law students will, maybe they'll be surprised, maybe they won't. I was surprised at how little I knew about the actual practice of law. So I came in with kind of an academic background and having done well in an academic setting. And Kirkland was a real shock to the system in both positive ways in the long term and also, some challenges in terms of negative ways. And so the humbling part, the part that was, quote unquote negative, I think was an awareness that although I had been in a very strong academic environment with very smart people, the attorneys at Kirkland and Ellis were a different level. They were incredibly intelligent, incredibly hardworking, incredibly demanding and precise. And the stakes and the pressure were very, very high. So even though I had been, a PhD student, done well, done one at Harvard Law School, I was just in awe of the surrounding people, but I also felt very inadequate when I started working. I didn't know how to write legal briefs, how to really write persuasively, how to think at that level. Also, a huge amount of non-legal skills and demands about how do you manage a workload? How do you manage a lot of demanding tasks and people and partners? So I think I was just stunned and very anxious about it. The positive part of it was that it was just, I was a sponge. It was an incredibly accomplished set of both colleagues, but also particularly the people working above me. So it was a tutorial, a crash course in how to practice law, how to think, how to write at an extremely high level. So long term, it really shaped me as an attorney. I look back on it and it was better than law. It was the most learning experience of my life. And geometrically, I grew and progressed as an attorney. And it was also one of the most stressful times of my life because one of the demands on the workload, but 2, having to come to terms with your ego and understanding that, you really had a lot to learn. You didn't really know what you were doing. You were going to make a lot of mistakes in an environment that didn't seem at times, particularly tolerant of mistakes. So that was my, my personal psychology wrestling with, am I smart? Am I not smart? Can I do this? Can I not do this? Am I competent? There were some very fundamental professional questions that I was confronted with in that environment. I ultimately came through it in a way that really shaped me and helped me. But there were some real, professional and personal challenges to survive there.
And you say you had anxiety and you were stressed, both because of the amount of work that was given to you and also the caliber of professionals you were working with. How did that stress and anxiety manifest itself?
One, it was hard to find personal time. And so I was, in a relationship that became a marriage. And so part of it was just not really being available or present there. And I had my daughter about a year and 4 months into my tenure at Kirkland. So it was just, so it was a real challenge to fight for that personal time. I think it manifested itself primarily and predominantly in me just being kind of worried all the time. This is to show my age and the time, this was the BlackBerry age. It was pre-iPhone. But I was just, I was the kid, I was the person who was constantly checking his BlackBerry, constantly checking this voicemail, constantly just aware, even on weekends or evenings, that there was stuff to be done because it was an environment. A lot of law firms are this way, but Kirkland at that time was particularly this way, where you never had the feeling that you were on top of your work because of the size of the cases and the complexity and the sheer amount of work. If you didn't know how to shut that off, then you would constantly have this low-level baseline sense of there's more to be done. And, oh my gosh, do I have an answer for that? Or we have a client meeting on Monday or a partner meeting on Tuesday. So I think that I, being somewhat of a type A guy, as a lot of law students are, it was just really difficult to not chronically feel this level of unease and worry. And it took me some time. It took me literally years to get to a place where I was like, okay, the imposter syndrome is over. You can handle this workload and perform and do good work, but you don't have to chronically be in this state of worry. And I think that's a little, we're now going back 24, 25 years. So I do think there has been a cultural change in law firm environments and in greater attention to associate and mental health issues in terms of that. So I think today there's less of that than there was. And I'm sure that when I joined the firm, it was different 20 years prior to when I was there. So I think things have changed a little bit. But I was kind of a bit of a nervous wreck for some period of time until I kind of got my sea legs and understood what it was to be a litigate, particularly litigation, which is it's not that other practices areas aren't stressful, but litigation is by nature another attorney, another side is trying to always make you look bad or look dumb,
Right.
or find the weaknesses in what you're doing. So that doesn't really help get a sense of ease if you're somewhat, high strung.
Yeah. And I mean, the cumulative impact of always feeling like you can't disconnect, you're always behind, that takes a toll mentally and physically. So if you think about, giving advice to, let's say, a law student who's really ambitious, given that Kirkland isn't exactly known for work-life balance, what advice would you give to a law student about how they should think about working hard or work ethic and kind of the pros and cons about making decisions on how they spend their time and how much they give those first few years?
I think step one would be, manage your expectations. I think that if you go into it understanding, look, I'm really not going to, I'm unlikely to have work-life balance for this beginning part of my career. And I'm okay with, and you have to be okay with that, I think, or you're better off being okay with that, saying, you know what, work is going to be higher on the totem pole than I might otherwise ideally want it to be. But the payoff of that is that's what it's going to take, or what it's likely going to take to really soak up and learn and become a professional and practice at a very, very high level. And that, it's like the analogy might be a professional athlete. If you're going into the NFL, like, Kirkland or, some of these New York firms or whatever, they're practicing at a very, very, very high level. And you don't have to choose that. But if you're at that level of ambition, if you want to push yourself to the highest level and work on those type of cases and be in that kind of environment, it's like joining a professional team. You're in training camp and you're working from dusk to dawn, and sometimes you're sore and you're in pain and you're having to learn a playbook that's enormous as a rookie. And I sort of follow the NFL, so I draw that kind of analogy, which is if you want to play for a professional team and perform at a high level in a professional environment, it's a lot of sacrifice. And if you enter in thinking, well, I don't want to work on weekends, or I don't want to be bothered on the evenings, or I don't want to be stressed out, I don't want to feel overwhelmed, then I think your expectations will likely be mismatched unless you're a genius or the world's most efficient person, which I was neither. Then it's a grind. It's hard work. But if you're saying to yourself, look, this amount of attention, this amount of work, and if you have loved ones or a relationship or friendships or family, if you can communicate with them from the get-go, look, I'm going to not be as available as I otherwise would want to be. I'm going to make the time I am available count and be present. But this is going to develop me and develop my career, and therefore it's going to impact either family, friends, whatever your situation is, then that would help. I think I just had so little awareness and understanding of what I was going into that I really was just kind of flat-footed. I thought I could just fake my way through it, and that was not the case.
You can't fake it. And I think it's just such a reality check for so many people who sign up for working at a big prestigious firm, and they understand what the billable targets are, but you almost can't even anticipate what that means day to day. So when I talk to associates who are saying, I don't know that I want to do this job. I don't know that I want to work this much. And I say, well, then why are you here? Why did you take this job offer? It wasn't a secret what the billable target is, but I think it's almost impossible to understand that means, oh, wait, I actually can't do my 5 p.m. workout class or even a 7 p.m. workout class. Or, oh, that actually means I'm going to have to cancel my family vacation a day before I'm supposed to go because this thing blew up. It's like reality really hits you hard. And it can also, as you mentioned, hit your loved ones hard, where they have to be as on board as you are, or else you're constantly going to feel guilty and it's going to be a disaster.
No, 100%. And I think the other slight nuance that, and I've seen this now because I've hired obviously in the group now as I've gotten further along in my profession. I hire a lot of people out of law school, and sometimes having these conversations to see the struggle they're dealing with. And it's not just the sheer workload, which can be great at times. It's also the quality, even if it's a 40-hour week, is that the expectation, if you're at a high level, is not perfection, but a very high level. So it's not just the sheer amount of time, it's that each hour, each task is an expectation of attention. So it's a mental taxing on you. It's not just the hours that you're putting in the work. It's often just, if you care about your work, and to be successful, you have to care about your work. It's following you around in the evening and on the weekends. It's when someone's talking to you, you're kind of thinking about, oh, geez, I kind of deal with that issue tomorrow or whatever. So it's a toll on you, mentally and physically, that you just have to, again, for most people, you're not required to do these jobs. So you really have to do some personal analysis, I think, beforehand and during the process of, why am I doing this? And hopefully it's not just a financial issue or just I want to be successful and powerful. There should be some. You'll be happier, I think, if you actually enjoy the work and you enjoy the process of the challenges of this work, that you get something out of it, personally and professionally, beyond just sort of the externalities that are there.
Yep. Yeah, you need to make an informed opt-in decision. I want to transition to Katten. So you're the co-chair of a subgroup within litigation, the Healthcare Fraud Litigation Group. Can you just take a moment and briefly explain what that group does?
What we do is we work within health insurance, but also automobile health insurance companies, really, but they're auto insurance, but they really are health insurers who have to, provide policies and provide insurance benefits for folks that are injured in car accidents or general health insurers. And we have kind of a hybrid practice. Part of our practice group works closely with insurers in-house fraud analytics teams or data analysts or what are called special investigation units, helping identify systemic fraud, because there are certain jurisdictions where there really is literally organized crime or other networks that are involved in systemic insurance fraud towards insurance companies. And so we work with them, analytically speaking, to identify suspected insurance fraud that's not claim by claim or not individual claims. These are kind of broad-based hundreds or thousands of claims that seem to be organized or affected by either medical providers or sometimes personal injury attorneys or other things. And so we work in-house on identifying that and also consulting with them on how they might manage that from a claims perspective. And then if there are significant issues of concern, we will at times reach out to medical providers or whoever the entity is that is suspected of fraud or at least of claims activity that is questionable. And we'll have conversations with them and try to resolve the issues, try to settle the concerns or educate ourselves if there are concerns. And then the last stage is that if we don't get to that place and the insurance company isn't satisfied with the responses, or if there is a discussion, then we will draft lawsuits and we will file lawsuits, typically in federal court. Sometimes these are racketeering RICO counts, sometimes they're common law fraud, sometimes they're declaratory judgment. So they vary, but the commonality is that we will engage in prosecuting lawsuits to try to address what we believe to be a systemic fraud.
Yeah, what a cool, unique group that you're in, that you're leading. So, what drew you to Katten specifically?
One dissatisfaction I had at Kirkland was the cases were so big and so enormous that I could never, ever imagine or dream that I would have a concept of all the different facts, all the different documents, all the different issues. So I wanted something that would feel that I could actually have a full grasp of a case. These were significantly smaller, more manageable matters. It was a smaller group, it was a smaller team, it was a smaller law firm. So the idea of ownership and growing something, but also feeling like I could have my arms around what was happening in the cases was significant to me. And then the last thing was the culture. Katten's a friendlier, again, I'm not really, I have a lot of friends still at Kirkland. I feel great about my career time at Kirkland. But I think Katten, because it's a little bit smaller and the cases are generally speaking, a little bit more manageable, depending on the area and the practice group, of course. But our practice group, I just had a sense of collegiality, and that I could be a little bit more my irreverent, informal self in this particular practice group at this particular law firm. It felt like a little bit of a better fit because I was wanting to not be burning the midnight oil quite as much. And so it was a combination of cultural fit and the work opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like Kirkland played such an important part of your career development and was a wonderful experience at that time. And then you evolved and needed different things and wanted different things and found a great fit in Katten. So when you think about the most memorable case you've ever worked on, what comes to mind?
I actually will go back to Kirkland. Partly it's because of where I was in my career, but partly because it was the nature of the case. So we had worked on these massive multi-billion-dollar average wholesale price cases, AWP they were called, and really almost every major pharmaceutical manufacturer that sold drugs in this country to the Medicare or Medicaid program, which was pretty much every pharmaceutical, had been sued there had been a whistleblower lawsuit that had been dormant for many, many years. But quickly, the Department of Justice and many, many state AGs across the country had filed lawsuits alleging that the pharmaceutical pricing was not accurately as reported as an average wholesale price. It wasn't really a true average wholesale price, and that led to these government programs overpaying for drugs. And it was a massive, massive, super complicated case. And for reasons that will continue to elude me, there was a fantastic partner named Helen Witt. He said, Kirkland, I had navigated my way to find people. There were very particular people. I wasn't trying to navigate necessarily a politically successful career at Kirkland. The fact that I did well and ultimately was working with good people was fantastic. But what I was looking for were opportunities. So I was looking for smaller cases in the Kirkland world that I could have more of a leadership or involved role in. And I was looking for partners that would be nicer, easier, or more mentoring to work with. So Helen was one of those people, but I hadn't worked that much with her. But I came back from a Seventh Circuit clerkship, and she told me that she was working on this major AWP case, and that the Department of Justice was about to unseal against us and two other pharmaceutical companies. So there are only three of these companies that were kind of the flagship leadership sort of DOJ test cases. And would I lead the DOJ part of this matter, the federal?
Wow.
I wasn't even a partner. I was a fifth-year associate. I didn't know what I was doing in retrospect. But I must have exuded, and I heard to some other people, I think sometimes I give the impression of confidence, or I sort of will imbue trust that might not be fully well earned, but something about me gave them, and Helen in particular, and also Ann Sidrees, who was another senior partner on the case, confidence that I actually could run this stuff. And so, in spite of my internal terror at, my gosh, how am I going to manage this case? I took over. Obviously I had a team working there, but I pretty much worked the leadership on this case, and I would float things up to Helen. But oh, that sounds great, Eric. Helen just kind of had a lot of confidence in me and a lot of trust in me. And so for 3 or 4 years, I was working full time on this case. And I was flying all over the country for these depositions. And when I walked into these depositions that were being held at, very prestigious New York law firms, the representatives from the other two pharmaceutical companies that were part of this sort of DOJ consolidation, these were super senior people for the most part. They were like, the gray hair guy or whatever.
Yeah.
Not always. But for the most part, it was very clear that everyone was above my fighting weight. They were all at minimum partners, if not senior partners. And in walks, Eric Gortner. I remember early on that they would be like, who is this guy? What's going on here? Kirkland's telling this guy. And when I was at times deposing, the head of CMS, the head of the Center of Medicare Services, and very senior government officials. And I'm in there taking depositions. But I think just as I kind of earned that confidence with Helen, I think that some of these attorneys, over time got beyond sort of the experience-ism or ageism of the situation and recognized, well, this kid is asking decent questions and is prepared and is helping the matters and is drafting decent briefs. And so anyway, the reason I'm giving this answer is because it was such a out of context experience for me. And I was so aware that I really did not have the experience to have the level of responsibility and the breadth and size of this case. And I also felt proud and appreciative, of the opportunity, and kind of rose to that, I think I rose to that challenge, and, we handled it as well as we could. But I think that both opposing counsel in the government and counsel from other pharmacies, and I think internally at Kirkland, there was a sense of, okay, this guy, it was a very sink or swim experience. And I sort of floated and paddled my way around,
I think you swam, or else you wouldn't have made partner at Kirkland. So, let them underestimate you. So what do you think you did to instill that confidence? Like, is there anything you can reflect on and pinpoint of? Was it body language? Was it asking questions? Was it just raising your hand? Was it just pretending like you knew more than you did? What did you do?
It's funny because I did some of the senior partners that mentored me and that time to haste me at Kirkland, became friends. And later on, as I got deeper in my career, I'd go out to coffee with them. And I actually asked that question because I wanted to understand a little bit better. sometimes you don't have the most objective sense of yourself. And so I think one of the things that did help me was that I was a little bit older. Remember, I did a PhD, so I probably had 5 or 6 years above the average law student, not just in chronological age, but I had, I was a clinical psychology guy, so I kind of was being trained in how to do therapy and how to write research papers and present at conferences. So I think I had a maturity that helped, right? I probably looked a little older. I could talk a little bit more intelligently. I could maybe write a little bit or think a little bit more. So that experience helped me a little bit there. I think there was also this, I don't like to look, even if I feel internally a level of anxiety and stress, I don't like to show that. So I think that I probably compensate for my lack of experience or knowledge with not overconfidence. I don't fake it, because that can also, you can lose trust quickly if you pretend you know an answer, or you do, I can do this and you can't. I think it was more, I'll take care of it. So the messaging I was giving to senior partners was, I got this.
Yeah.
Not I know how to do it, but I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to
Yes.
embarrass you in front of the client or in front of the court and the team. So it was more about, and what really helped was work ethic. I'll get into this later maybe, but I really do believe that, whether it's 7/10 or 6/10, I don't know what the formula is, but your willingness to roll up your sleeves and try to take ownership to figure it
Yeah.
out. So yes, I asked a lot of questions. I did a lot of research. I scrambled around a lot, but I really just was, okay, I can't let this client down, and I can't let my colleagues down, and I can't let myself down. So I've just got to figure this out. And I think that there's some kernel in me, I suppose, that always knew, you're going to figure this out. You have no idea how to do this. What you are is resourceful.
Yes.
And so maybe that's the level of confidence that I was exuding, and wasn't that I knew everything or playing some role, but rather that they could pick up that I had enough raw skills and work ethic, but I was going to figure out how to swim the shore. I wasn't going to just fight her. So somehow that was what I've heard back from some of the partners I worked with, was, geez, there's something about you that gave us confidence that you were going to handle it, or you were going to figure it out. Generally I did, just not entirely sure how, Elise.
It sounds to me like you took it seriously. You took your responsibility seriously. You understood what was on the line. You felt a sense of ownership of, it's important to me to get this figured out, or to do high quality work, or to hit this deadline. And I think that in of itself is unique, where oftentimes I hear partners say, the associates are just kind of blowing deadlines. Do they not realize the impact of us not hitting this deadline or not communicating with the client? So you showed you cared, and that you would make every possible effort to figure it out and get it done right.
I think that's right. And just real quickly, because you said something that sort of sparked something. I think, because I think I've always had this, and maybe maybe a shame response, or maybe a sense of responsibility, or whatever it is, from my childhood. But I'm not sure where it comes from. It comes from my father, which was this, if you do something, do it well ethic. That's carried me through my life. And what I just thought of was my other than the paper route, my very first job when I turned 15 and a half or 16 was at McDonald's, right? I was in California, and I was so stressed. I worked the grill. I was doing the hamburger thing. And I was so stressed about not being the quickest guy on the grill, and making sure the burgers were well cooked, and that if I did breakfast, portioning the eggs correctly. I had this, looking back on it, it's almost comical, but it's also really great, which is, I just really cared about not blowing it, doing it right, doing it.
Yes.
It was just so many people at the McDonald's job were like, they didn't care, they were blowing it off or whatever. I worked at a movie theater in the same way, and I was working the video counter and the candy counter, and getting everything quickly and precisely, and serving the customers quickly. So I have always had this do every little job. This kind of, it's a very Japanese cultural ethic too, which, whether you're cleaning a toilet or you're serving at a major aerospace company, that every job is kind of important and sacred. And if you're doing it don't flake off on it. And that has been my characteristic for a lot of menial jobs in my life. This sense of just, I want to do it right, or I just want to, if I'm doing it, don't blow it off. And so that was important. I mean, the last thing that was important to me was that I had an appreciation of the amount of money I was being paid. And I still have that today, which is this guilt about, if you're paying me a lot of money, I need to honor that. A lot of people don't get these opportunities or have this job or have that kind of material success. So when I first started my job, at Kirkland and Ellis, coming out of graduate school, the starting salary was 125,000, which was just, it still is a lot of money, but it was insane at that time. 2000, 2001. And most I'd ever made in my life, I think, was like 17,000 in a year. I felt a responsibility, even though it was in a personal law firm. I was being paid to take the job seriously. And that was just an ethos that has followed me. And unfortunately, I haven't always felt that with in modern times. I think because of .com and the ease of money, that sometimes I don't know if people working in a law firm environment that are younger or whatever fully appreciate the very unique financial opportunity that it is. But for me, it was a generational shift in material wealth that was palpable, and I just couldn't do anything other than honor that, because I realized that there were a lot of folks that weren't having those kind of economic opportunities.
Yeah. What I appreciate about you is that you take pride in your work, no matter what the compensation is. So that in itself is so cool and has clearly served you very well. So, as we wrap up today, one theme that I think has emerged from this conversation is your work ethic and your appreciation for someone's work ethic, that being hugely important, maybe even more so than intelligence. And you've told me that, outside of this conversation, that you value work ethic more than intelligence. Now, that's coming from Mr. Harvard Law top 10% of the class. So I want to understand, why is it that work ethic is so important? And if someone listening is thinking, I'm not the brightest, I don't have the highest IQ, I didn't go to Harvard Law School, what would you say to them?
Well, yeah. And I think that even with the PhD or the Harvard thing, whatever, just so people can know, I was pretty flaky in high school, and I really don't see myself as a particularly intelligent person. I can be quick about some things and efficient. Once I kind of figure out things, I'm a good problem solver, and then I get really efficient. But it takes me a while to figure things out. I think I just, I put in the work. In law school, I put in the work. I was in the library Saturday nights and Friday nights and reading all my assignments and going to classes. Like, I was diligent. So I wasn't like it came to me, in the same way in the law firm environment. So I feel very strongly about this, and I empirically have seen this. And I think that anyone that's in law school that's looking at either credentials or the name of the law school or where people finished, look at the top partners across all these law firms, and what you'll see is an incredible variety of law schools in both the name and possibly in status or accomplishment, although I bet all of them were pretty high achieving in their law schools, respectively speaking. I think that, what we're doing is really not esoteric academic, quantum physics. What we're doing, it does require intelligence, but a lot of it requires, marshaling together either facts if you're a litigator, or the due diligence work in corporate, or whatever, if you're in private equity, whatever practice you're on. I think success in the law firm environment has a lot to do with the elbow grease, our details. Are you paying attention to details? Are you taking ownership of details? Are you thinking through all the issues, whether it's a deal or a litigation or whatever? Are you paying attention to client service? Are you the person that follows up on a phone call immediately, or checks in on people, or makes sure that they're getting what they need? And within a law firm as well, are you thinking about your partners, your colleagues, the firm's requirements, whatever? A lot of those things are not, some of them might be social intelligence, but they're not traditional IQ, cognitively based things. And so to me, we have tended in our career to mistakenly think that the really brilliant people, look, if you're brilliant and you're a hard worker,
Yeah, double whammy.
That's great. That's great. And I'm not saying there's a certain level of analytic skill or understanding as an attorney that you have to have. But once you've crossed that base threshold of having a functioning enough brain to do the problem solving that's required in the particular field you're in, I then would, if you said to me, Eric, you now got to choose between to get 60 to 80% more through hard work or more brains, hard work every time. And I've seen it time and time again that the people that have been successful in our practice group or in our firm environments have not always been the brightest people necessarily. But they uniformly have been some of the hardest working people.
Yeah. Well, Eric, you've motivated me to step up my game and work a lot harder, take more pride in my work. So thank you so much for this insight. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, for sure.
Thanks for listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn for weekly tips on how to accelerate your career. If you're loving this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd click follow on your favorite listening platform. While you're there, give us a 5-star rating. If you're interested in having me speak at your organization, or if you have topics you'd like us to cover on the podcast, send me a note at info@eleviewconsulting.com. That's info@ELEVIEW consulting.com. All opinions expressed by Elise and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Eleview Consulting or any law firm. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as legal advice or the basis for legal decisions.